Welcome back to Season 5 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sara F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sara F. Hathaway.
Hello and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 199, Season 5, episode 36. So I don't know if you've noticed yet or not, if you're one of my YouTube subscribers, that my soon-to-be co-host, Chin, cannot show his face on camera. So you'll just have to leave it be as the mystery man. So I don't know what I'm going to do with the intro video. I hacked it last time. Maybe I'll just do a record from my side. But yeah, still dealing with that. So anyway, today's episode is going to be a super spectacular episode. It's a topic that I really wanted to shine awareness on human trafficking and the realities of it in our world today. So I'm really excited to do this episode. I want to get through my intro real quick so we can jump into it, because I know some of you came over just to listen to the great information that Skip Buck is bringing to us today. Skip Buck is a retired sheriff sergeant, and this topic's pretty near and dear to his heart as well. So can't wait to get into that later on. We're getting my garden done. Well, the garden done. We had to construct a fence around it to make sure that basically my dogs wouldn't go in there. So got that done this weekend. That was a lot of fun. My dogs actually got sprayed by skunks this week, which really sucked. But thank goodness for being prepared, because I had an extra bottle of hydrogen peroxide in the back storage. Busted that out with some baking soda and some Dawn dish soap. And you know, that is like the miracle mix-up right there. We went from like wanting to hurl from the smell to being like, do we smell it still? So can't say enough good things. The Humane Society of America, or American Humane Society, they have the recipe there. So go ahead and go over there and show your love for all the work that they're doing, and then grab some great info while you're at it. Well, I think things with my new co-host Chin were really, really excellent. I had a really fun time putting that episode together. So I can't wait till season 6 to welcome Chin back on a permanent basis. It's going to be so much fun to put together the podcast with him, be able to bounce back and forth with him during the intro and stuff like that as well. Endless Night, Book 6 in the Changing Earth series, is available for pre-sale on Amazon right now. The ebook is. Getting the audiobook uploaded, and the print book is ready to go. It'll all be coming out on June 1st. So yay, the Endless Night is here, and we're going to be starting that podcast next month as well. So epic story, and you know, it's going to some really, really dark places. So bear with me as we experience the adventure together. Well, but I just want to let you know that is available for pre-sale right now. And, you know, it's a couple bucks. So go out there, show some love for me, and pick that ebook up. Okay, so last week we caught up with Vince as he was leaving the homesteads, going into Denver, and then leaving Denver, headed out to go find Erica. This week, we're catching back up with Erica as she just endures this adventure that she's on with TJ Swenson. And I guess you can't really call it an adventure, maybe a journey or a moment of trial that she's on with this man who's just kind of psycho crazy. So that's where we're catching up this week. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into chapter 36 of Dark Days in Denver. Chapter 36. Erica was utterly humiliated as the ferry left port, headed towards the town of Vernon. Standing in her sports bra with a burlap sack chained around her neck, she wondered, how could people let this happen? She looked out of the burlap. She saw she was grouped with a whole load of people in chains. "Excuse me, sir," a gentleman summoned Swenson. "What?" he asked as the man approached. "I don't know where you come from, but where I come from, we don't parade women around half naked, even if they are refugees," the man told him. Erica looked up at him and recognized his face. It was Melvin. He transported Vince and Erica from the north down the Mississippi Sea. His muscular black body and green eyes were just as alluring as ever. Erica's heart begged to talk with him, to signal him, but she didn't know how. Even if she could. What about Dexter, she worried. What do you care about it, Swenson hissed back. Either cover her up, or I'll throw you off my boat right here in the middle of the lake, Melvin threatened him, handing Swenson a jacket. Swenson stared fiercely at him. The commander nudged him and Swenson complied. He cut Erica's zip tie on her hands, put the jacket on her, and re-zipped them even tighter than before. She winced in pain inside the hood. Swenson moved closer to the commander and whispered in a hushed conversation. The hateful look in Swenson's eyes conveyed his feelings towards Melvin as he argued with Commander Gray. Commander Gray kept shaking his head and trying to get Swenson to calm down. You must have screwed up big time, or your handlers are just major dicks, a woman next to her whispered quietly. What happened to your shirt? Where are all these people going? Erica whispered curiously. Some will be sold south to Mexico, and some will be sold as slaves in the Federal Republic, she answered. Why the hood? The woman asked. I'm Erica Moore, she whispered. They're taking me to General Henderson. You got to tell the guy who runs this boat. He knows me. The lady looked at her curiously. And I'm Mother Teresa, the woman laughed. Erica looked over to ensure that Swenson was still busy talking with Commander Gray. His dark eyes were watching her. He saw the woman laughing and pulled at the chain. He brought her in so close, he was breathing down her neck. What did you tell her? He whispered. That I was an angel sent by God, Erica answered. What did you tell her? He insisted. Erica didn't say anything. He tightened his grip again, threatening. We're going to be off this boat in a minute, and then Sheila can find out. I didn't tell her anything. She asked why I had to wear the hood. Erica admitted the partial truth. He looked at her, remembering the woman's laugh. What did you freaking tell her? He asked again, pulling the chain tighter around her neck. He was slick. No one around her could see her turning blue in the hood. I told her I was Erica Moore, and you were taking me to the Supreme General, Erica admitted. Swenson strengthened his hold and whispered to Serge. No one spoke during the remainder of the ferry ride. Swenson never let his tight grip on her go. Reaching the boat dock, he finally relaxed his hold as they started filing off the boat. Once on land, Erica watched Serge go the same direction as the man who owned the woman she had spoken with. It's your fault, Swenson whispered to her. Now she has to die. And your son, too. He's going to kill you! Run! Erica yelled at the man. But no one would listen to a woman chained up in a hood. They thought she had gone loony. Shut her up, Swenson, Commander Gray insisted. He pulled at the chain at her neck sharply and her voice was cut off as her windpipe closed. Merkley looked sadly at her as she stared back at him. This whole situation is his fault, Erica told herself. She focused all her hatred on him. He mouthed the words, I'm sorry, to her, but it only infuriated her even more. She lunged at him, headbutting him in the stomach, before Swenson tugged on her leash again. Erica fell down, gasping. Her neck couldn't take much more abuse, and it was already brightly colored with deep bruises all around it. Serge returned from his mission and nodded to Swenson. Erica sighed heavily, disgusted with their activities. We all set then? Commander Gray asked. Good to go. I can't wait to get back into federal territory, Swenson stated. Only a couple of more miles now. Once we get into Chattanooga, we can take a transport back to the capital. We'll be heroes, the commander speculated. The Red River marked the current split between federal land and Texas. They crossed it without incident and removed Erica's hood. She watched the river trickling by in the dry riverbed. We're home, Swenson whispered in her ear while he gave her chain a solid yank. Her neck hurt so bad, she started holding on to the chain herself so that her hands could absorb the violent yanks from Swenson. Don't do that, he told her. You're going to break my freaking neck. I thought the Supreme General said pure and unbroken, Erica asked, shoving it in his face. Don't you tell me what I'm going to do, he said, reaching for his whip. Swenson, lay off, Commander Gray warned him. Erica smiled slyly at him. Swenson stared back at her with his dark eye sockets and his bulgy eyes. His nose was a dominating triangle on his face that ended in deep ridges down his cheeks. The days on the road had left his clean-shaven head and beard with a 5 o'clock shadow. Now that we're here, let's take a break, boss. It's been a long day, Serge complained. I'm fine with that. Merkley, find us a campsite, the commander told him, while he drank from his canteen. Erica watched him, licking her lips. You need some? Bishop questioned Erica. She's fine, Swenson answered. TJ, we can't take her to the general dead, Bishop countered. Fine, but just a little. She doesn't need that much strength now, Swenson told him. Bishop brought his canteen over and poured it into her mouth. She gulped down the liquid as fast as she could. That's enough, Swenson said, knocking the canteen away from her mouth. I got a spot, Merkley announced, ushering them through the trees. It was a secluded space that could be easily defended. Come on, Swenson told Erica, dragging her along. Swenson was still enraged with Melvin's actions on the boat, and he was tired from a long day of traveling. Erica noticed his surveillance pattern wasn't as solid, and he was distracted. She, however, was still waiting for her moment. Any moment. As they headed over towards the tree line on the edge of the camp, Erica spied a handle sticking up in the ground. It was black and shaded. Swenson hadn't noticed yet. As he led her close to the tree, she collapsed on the handle. He looked at her curiously. I'm tired, she told him, and my neck hurts. If you promise you won't run, I'll put it back on your waist, Swenson offered. It was the first kind gesture he had ever made towards her. I won't run tonight, Erica agreed. Promise me you won't run ever, Swenson requested. Say, TJ, I promise you I will never run from you. Say it just like that. Erica wouldn't say it. She just stared back at him. Even though the chain was grinding into her neck, she couldn't promise that. Fine, then deal with it, he said, ripping on the chain so it jerked hard. Erica cringed in pain. He approached, zip-tied her legs together, and retied her hands behind her back, then connected his end of the chain to the tree. He left in a tantrum to go get some water and try to relax. Erica slowly felt the object she had spied. Her hand running down the handle, she felt the blade at the end. She made tiny movements as she removed the knife from the dirt and turned it around. Swenson sat by the fire staring at her. His mind was still distressed over the ferry boat incident, and he contented himself with his water and his ration bars. Trying to keep her body perfectly still, Erica's hands were working rapidly. She slid the knife up and down on the plastic zip ties. The pressure on her wrist was eliminated and she felt them release. She held her position with the knife behind her back. She knew her moment was coming soon. Swenson left the men to go relieve himself. Merkley was pacing around, looking towards Erica. Come on over, Erica's mind begged him. Finally, he did. I am so sorry, Erica, Merkley said remorsefully. Do you think sorry is going to make up for this? My family is dead, she said quietly, looking at him blankly. What can I do? He asked. Die, she answered, shoving the knife into his neck. Serge looked up from his cards when he heard a strange noise coming from Merkley. He approached with a curious look on his face. Merkley, he called for him, leaning down. Erica shot up with the knife and slit his throat. As Serge fell in front of her, Erica flipped the knife in the air and grabbed the blade. She lifted her arm to throw it into the commander's head when suddenly the whip cracked the back of her hand, splitting it open. Unable to hold the knife, she yelled with surprise and pain as the blade fell to the ground. Check on Serge, TJ yelled to Bishop as he swooped in to retrieve the knife. You freaking whore, he yelled, grabbing a hold of her head in his palm and throwing her to the ground. Her face bounced off a rock, and the old wound on her eyebrow split open again, trickling blood into her eye. Give me your hands, he commanded from behind her. He zipped up a tie so tight she could feel the blood running down into her palms. Damn it, he cursed, watching his friend receive medical attention. Didn't I tell you not to get close to her? He said, pacing around the camp. Keep pressure on it, right here, Bishop directed Commander Gray as he grabbed for more gauze. We have to get him to Chattanooga now. They packed up camp in a hurry and shouldered his weight up the road to the first checkpoint they came to. Swenson pulled at Erica fiercely, cursing her the entire way. The federal soldier hustled out to meet them. Commander Gray, sir, the man saluted. Do you have a vehicle here, he asked. Yes, sir, a jeep, he responded. Is it running, Commander Gray asked. Yes, sir, he answered. Give me the keys, Commander Gray ordered. Yes, sir, the boy replied, handing over the keys. The men loaded Serge into the back of the jeep, and Bishop sat with him, tending to his wounds. Commander Gray was driving.
Swenson wrapped his arms around Erica and took her with him as he got into the passenger seat. They left Merkley's body where it fell. Swenson squeezed her all the way to Chattanooga. Serge was barely clinging to life. Bishop and Commander Gray rushed him to the medical facility. Swenson turned on Erica. Commander Gray was gone. It was just her and him. He looked at her with the most fiercely scary eyes she had ever seen. She shrunk from his grasp, taking a few steps back. "Don't you run from me," he demanded, instinctively snatching his whip and lashing it around her ankle. He yanked it back sharply, and Erica fell hard on the ground. Swenson mounted her in the street. "Say it," he raged. "Say, TJ, I will never run from you." "No," she replied defiantly. He smacked her repeatedly across the face. "Say it!" She cowered from his strikes but remained quiet. "Come on," he said, getting up and dragging her with him. He walked her into a prison facility that was located across from the medical facility. "Give me the keys to a cell," Swenson ordered the girl at the desk. "Sir, we can take care of the prisoner for you," a soldier who ran the facility suggested. "Nobody touches this prisoner except me. Nobody. Do you hear? It is for your protection, not hers," he snapped. "Now give me the keys." The young lady did as she was told and handed the keys to the second cell to Swenson. He jerked Erica down the hall, occasionally kicking her when she fell. The soldiers watched his assault on the woman but said nothing. Mr. Swenson was well known in the Federal Republic as someone you did not cross. He was one of the finest bounty hunters employed by the Supreme General, and he performed his job ruthlessly. Dragging Erica on the ground into the cell, he stood her up on her tippy toes and hooked her chain up high so she was forced to stay in that position. "Do you have a pair of shackles over there?" he asked the soldiers. "Yes, sir," the man replied, bringing him a pair of chains that fit around her ankles. "Bring me some real handcuffs, too," he told the boy. The young soldier did as he was told. "Do not, under any circumstance, get too close to those bars. I am not kidding about this one," Swenson said, leaving her in the cell and taking the keys with him. Erica hung by her neck, gasping for air, while she waited for him to return. She watched the sun outside of the prison set lower and lower until finally he came back. The hateful look of anger he displayed grew even more intense. "Serge Popolov is dead," Swenson declared, staring her in the eyes through the bars. "Good," Erica said faintly. "You know what that means?" he asked, opening the cell door. He slithered up next to her. "You get a J," he hissed in her ear. Erica tried to remind him of General Henderson's words, but all she could get out was "Serge Popolov was my friend," he told her. Hearing his words, she mustered all the air she could and yelled, "And Vince Moore was my everything. We're not anywhere near even." She wasn't about to feel sorry for his loss. Swenson stopped her spin when she was looking out the bars at the young soldiers out there. Other prisoners sat quietly in their cells, not daring to say a word. Swenson brought an extra pair of cuffs with him and chained each of her wrists to the bars in front of her. He pulled out his whip and cracked it loudly a few times before he flipped it, destroying the jacket she wore. Then he threw the leather strap out and ripped it across the small of her back. Erica ground her teeth together to ensure she wouldn't scream. She was not giving him the satisfaction. He snapped it again, and Erica grimaced in pain. Again it tore across her skin until he made a J in blood next to the T. He left Erica there all night, gasping and bleeding. In the morning, she was barely coherent. Not even Bishop cared about her state. Serge was his friend, too.
Despite her best efforts, Erica's journey to the Supreme General continues. You know, normally in my books, I would do like the escape and it's successful, but I really needed a way to take all of you, my listeners and my readers, into the central region to show you the extent of what is happening inside of there. So I really wanted to paint that picture, and getting Erica in there was really the only way that I could really develop that end of the story. So here she goes. She's going into the lion's den with the lion himself, pretty much.
using the slave trade and the uptick in what would be happening with people also gave me a chance to spotlight what is currently happening. People are like, oh, well, you would see that people are going to become enslaved and stuff like that. Well, we can look at history and see what the trend has been there. And when all kinds of morals and rules and society is thrown out the window, what are you left with? And the plain and simple fact is that no matter how advanced we think our society and everything is today, this happens all around us nowadays. And human trafficking is just something that should not be happening in today's day and age, as far as I'm concerned. So Skip Buck agreed to do this episode with me, and he brings with him a ton of information. Skip was adopted at the age of 9 and raised in Southern California in the San Gabriel Valley. He attended Rosemead High School and was actively involved in sports, student leadership, choir, and school plays. At the University of Redlands, he was the captain of the football team, earning an all-district and all-conference honors, participated in wrestling, and was president of the Interfraternity Council and a member of Chi Sigma Chi fraternity. He graduated from the University of Redlands in 1979 with a BA in physical education. His college sweetheart, Kathy Morris Buck, and he were married shortly after college, and they were celebrating 36 years of marriage back then. I bet you they're pushing about 40 right now. They have 2 daughters, Morgan and Heather, and they're both happily married and successful in their individual pursuits. Skip began his career in law enforcement late in 1981 and retired in 2008. During his career, he worked custody, patrol, chief coroner's investigator, narcotics task force, SWAT, youth and community services, a DARE instructor, family abuse, homicide, felony assaults, career criminal apprehension team, child sexual assaults, vehicle crimes, and homeland security. He was promoted in 2006 to sergeant and managed patrol teams until his retirement in 2008. His lovely bride and him now are California refugees. They have left California and they're out in northern Idaho enjoying their retirement there. So lots of love for Skip. As always, miss you big time, buddy. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Skip to the show.
Today, I am back with my good buddy, Skip Buck, and I'm just so happy to have the moment to sit down and chit-chat with Skip this morning. So, hi, Skip. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Happy to be here. We, got a chance last time we got together to talk about dead people, and now we're going to talk about human trafficking and slavery. Yes. So we're just delightful in giving people bright and rosy things to discuss.
Cheery, very cheery topics for us. Yes.
It reminds me of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. You ever see that movie? They have the one girl in the group meeting, and she says, oh, we're going to be talking about death and dismemberment now, but it's really upbeat. Anyway, not much you can do to make it upbeat, but it's nice to be aware of.
Yeah, like I say, I'm approaching some darker topics with my new character that I have coming out. So we'll just have to hang on tight and do the best we can through the next couple seasons. Good things will happen, I promise everybody. So today in my story, the bad guy that I've introduced, TJ Swenson, he is taking Erica out. He's killed her family, basically. He's taking her away back to the central region. And they transport her there as a slave. And their slavery is coming back around because people aren't eating. They have more humans than they do food, basically. So if you could sell your neighbor for some food, and so be it, right? So that's kind of how this is evolving in my story. But I really wanted to highlight the fact that this is such a huge problem in our world today that a lot of people don't realize exists. And so I really wanted to do this topic on human trafficking and just bring it into light. So does this still exist? And about how many people do you think are still living as slaves in our modern world today?
Well, I would start by saying, no, it doesn't exist, and we have about 12 people maybe in slavery, but I'd be lying. It's a very unfortunate, often misunderstood, not often spoke about. You won't go to a club, a party, or gathering of friends, and people say, oh, hey, what do you think about human trafficking? It exists. It's huge. And although the perception might be that as a developed country here in the United States, we are not a victim or akin to this particular practice. We are in a very, very small corner of it. I experienced it when I worked in Sacramento. We found in Sacramento that young girls in particular from the more difficult ghetto-style neighborhoods were being taken to Reno and Las Vegas by older male adults and forced into prostitution. And that's just on a very, very, very small scale. According to the United Nations, and again, these estimates are believed to be because of lack of reporting and fear of repercussions, particularly to family or those that are connected to the particular slave victims, that 20 to 30 million modern day slaves exist. And that sounds like a huge number, but if you think worldwide, that these are not just individuals that are taken and forced into prostitution, but oftentimes to indentured servants, or they're, as you said in your book, they're traded with families from very, very poor neighborhoods for labor or for prostitution in order to make the families that survive in that community a little better off, or with the hopes that when they return, if they choose to go into this type of slavery, as opposed to being forced into it or deceived into it, that they have things better when they return to the community, which oftentimes doesn't happen. But anyway, that's kind of where we're at that. I have a figure here too. The United States State Department says 600,000 to 800,000 individuals are trafficked across borders every year. Well, that estimate compared to the estimate of the UN is significantly lower, but perhaps our department doesn't have as much of a global look at it, or we choose to maybe be less concerned with other nations that this occurs in, certainly at a greater rate than what it does in the United States. But as I said, it still occurs here on a regular daily basis, and it's going to continue.
Like 30 million people still in slavery. Well, what's the population of the United States?
Yeah.
30 million people.
Yeah, about the entire country.
Yeah, it's like the entire
massive
population of the United States is somewhere.
Yeah, and the concern, I mean, the biggest, I think when people look at this, the first thing they think about is young girls and forced into prostitution, and certainly that is a huge part of it, probably the biggest chunk of it. We've seen it in movies like Taken, and a few of those others in the Hollywood production. And it's not always that way. It's not always pure deception, and they're taking these individuals for sexual prostitution or whatever. Oftentimes these people will answer an ad. They'll answer an ad to go get a new job, to go see some artwork, whatever it is, and they're caught that way. And sometimes not even knowing that that's what they're heading to when they're put on a plane or into a vehicle and they're removed to another location, with points of deception all along the way. Oftentimes individuals will accept this in their very indigent, deprived communities as a way to better their family. They'll go on to labor. Southeast Asia is huge with the looms, and they'll go there to work for just very nominal pay, work 18 to 20 hours a day in order to have money to go back to the family, or as they would hope to make their lives better down the road, or for their children if they have children, or whatever. So it's not always exactly as Hollywood displays it, that they're deceived, they're taken, they're kidnapped, and they're drugged and they're kept in slave bondage and so on. Certainly that does happen, but that's not the only methodology.
Volunteered for, but they don't have the understanding that this is like a permanent situation. And
exactly, yeah.
There is no like down the line. So.
And you have a question here. How does the average abduction happen? And I think we kind of answered that.
Yeah.
It can be by any means, and one has to be aware in their own life and with their own family that something that might look too good might be just that. If you remember, it was kind of a big thing when I was a young kid growing up for young girls or guys to answer ads to be models.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant anything from being a model, if it was a legitimate ad, to being in pornographic movies, to abductions or things of that nature. But oftentimes, I remember some friends that were males that answered these ads to be male ads in the Los Angeles area when I was growing up, and they wound up selling magazines door to door. Now, is that forced labor? No, but it's certainly a deception.
Right.
And so again, if it sounds too good, it probably is. And you got to be careful who you trust out there too.
That's true. Yeah, that's why I like having, just answering the Craigslist ad or whatever, be very careful. Do that in a public location kind of thing. Very public and not at your place.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there a specific type of person? So you say like Hollywood, we're always thinking of like these seedy little people, that would be, is there a certain type of person that you would be more alerted to, than others? Who's doing this?
Again, not really so much, because it can be someone, let's say in Southeast Asia, from someone's church or community group, who says, hey, I have an opportunity for, your two children, if they'll come with me, they're going to do this particular thing, that particular thing, not realizing that these children are actually being taken away into slave labor. Yeah. And it can be as bold and brazen as Taken, where they meet at an airport and, hey, don't I know you? I can show you the town. I'm from France, and I'm going to show you a good time, and winding up, deceiving. And in that particular case, beautiful young women that are now taken off into servitude for prostitution purposes. There's really nothing to say that as a profile for somebody that takes people into servitude. And again, the types of servitude, anything from prostitution to indentured servants to working 18, 20 hours weaving rugs. I don't want to mention the shoe company's name, but maybe you're making shoes for an exceedingly reduced amount because you're being paid an hourly wage when you might not work otherwise.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, a lot of mine work is still that way nowadays.
Yes.
Over mines and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of the hazardous, dangerous work that can't be done, by willing volunteers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then we talked a little bit too about, it doesn't just happen to women for sexual exploitation. That people take people for all kinds of stuff. Happens to like little boys are very popular now. I mean, it's disgusting, but so it's not just as a parent, you're not just like, oh, I have boys, so I don't have to worry about it.
There's a group, an organization called the Man Boy Love Association. I don't know if you've ever heard them speak, and if you ever did find a video, you would be aghast. They actually have professionals, doctors, lawyers, attorneys in their group. Mm-hmm. Their national motto is sex before 8 or else it's too late. And they profess a thing called negative body guilt. And they believe the individual young male has not had sex with male or female, generally with a male, before the age of 8. They have negative body guilt that they will never overcome. And they need to have these relations. And they have national conferences. They have an organized network. And I can't say that they're a group that's responsible, but certainly groups like that would target young boys.
Wow, that is.
And, we hear it and we're appalled and can't believe it exists, but there are people like this, and they will certainly target young men as well as, young women. So yeah, as a parent, if you have young boys, don't look the other way. You're not going to Walmart and letting them wander through the aisles alone. Do you have the most beautiful children in the world or the ugliest children in the world? I wouldn't worry.
That doesn't matter. Yeah, either.
Doesn't matter.
Yep. Yeah.
It's something to be concerned about it at all times.
It's really just heartbreaking to me that this still exists in our world, and so many people are concerned about things that happened, long time ago compared to what's happening now, and that's sickening. So we talked about too that all the victims aren't deceived. It's not always like the Taken type scenario where some people are actually signing up for like, okay, I'm good, I'm gonna do that, because in these third world countries you're not not as good off. I would hope that nobody from the U.S. is doing that, but I don't know.
I would think it's less of a concern in the United States that people are willingly signing up for this. But yeah, if you picture yourself in a third world country where you cannot get a job, we're looking now. I've got friends that are I've become friends with through Facebook that are missionaries that are actually natives to the Mozambique area where the flooding's occurring right now. Let's kind of progress that. Let's say the flooding's cleared now. Or in a period of time. And now you've got massive devastation. You've got a huge cleanup. And you've got a lot of young people around that aren't employed, that aren't helping the family out. I could see that as an opportunity for somebody to, go out and solicit. Yeah. And these individuals be essentially indentured servants. They would be removing mud and cleaning up dead animals and dead bodies and at a minimal expense and getting it done at private levels or government levels even. And sometimes, don't preclude the fact that governments and organizations that are considered legitimate might not be involved in these types of practices to further their gains too, or their needs. And certainly that's if you're a possibility.
In that type of industry, that's a great opportunity for you to go in areas where it's been devastated to
exactly, yeah,
find a whole bunch of willing participants.
Exactly.
So same thing with Venezuela. There was a lot of women that started prostituting themselves, going over to Guatemala and stuff like that because of the horribleness of the situation. So that wasn't something that, well, I guess it is kind of forced upon, but not really, Yeah,
it's forced by circumstance rather than, a deception.
Right.
In that as an individual, they know what they're going into. It doesn't mean that they're still not walking into the bowels of hell. It just means maybe that they were doing it of their own volition, but the pain and the reality of 20 hours of forced labor is still the same.
Yeah, fair enough. So what kind of organizations? We have a lot of organizations doing good things in the U.S. So let's get some of that information to people. So if they want to go and make a difference, they can get some quality contacts to be able to do that.
Okay, I had to be remiss if I didn't admit this. I've heard a lot of these organization names, but I had to kind of do a little bit of research. You helped me with some of that in looking at this because they're out there, you hear they're out there. I've seen some on Facebook. There are a number of organizations in various smaller communities and at state levels. But the one I found that was probably the most far-reaching, and I don't know if you saw this too, perhaps you did, is the Polaris Project. And the Polaris Project in the United States has the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline, which is one area where individuals can, number one, get information if they feel they're being targeted, and assist them in getting law enforcement connections and advice in that direction. And also, if individuals or families have felt that this is what's occurred, if you open up the newspaper, the news, social media now, it's not hardly a day that goes by that I can remember recently when there are not missing children and many cases of late young adults.
That's true.
And sometimes are these runaways? Are there family situations involved? Yes.
How about the situation the other day? There was just a flight attendant who noticed this young girl with this guy, and she, the young girl looked very, very off, right? So she, and I believe she called the hotline.
I think that's exactly what occurred. That I remember seeing that, and had she not felt uncomfortable and intervened in that, and that's maybe something we can do as individuals is be a little bit more heads up to those types of unusual pairings, if you will, or circumstances that just don't seem like they fit. And what's the phone call?
Yeah,
you aren't accusing somebody. There's like a stigma attached. If you call somebody a child molester publicly, they become a child molester and they're guilty until proven innocent, almost the way society is right now, because that's so frowned upon. But in this particular circumstance with trafficking, you have no idea what the potential of that might have been with this airline attendant seeing that. Was this a prostitution circumstance? Was it indentured servant? Who cares? She didn't feel comfortable with it. She felt comfortable enough to call, and when the investigation was completed, she was right.
She was right.
And if she wasn't right, that individual probably would have no clue on the planet who was involved in initially pointing a finger or showing some concern.
Yep.
So the Polaris Project,
doing all the safety stuff now. They are putting that hotline as a safety requirement in every business. In every business, you should have that hotline posted on your wall.
that's excellent.
Cool. Yeah.
We need to raise awareness at the ground level like that. That's excellent. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
The other thing I looked here is different countries have organizations like in India. They have COSA, which is the Children's Organization of Southeast Asia. They're predominantly concerned with the sex trade that's occurring in India and those that are taken into servitude for prostitution purposes. But they also assist in that country, and apparently they're a very, very large organization, well funded. Urban Light in Thailand also deals with indentured servants as well as sexual servants. And Urban Light is an organization that's Christian based. And I actually have a family member that is indirectly connected with them. And so he's been with an organization that actually works with them and other organizations in the trafficking issues. My college roommate's also very active in that, the sexual trafficking. Now he's in South Carolina area. But anyway, then another group that I saw was Good Weave. Good Weave, we talked about this briefly, but a huge trade in the Southeast Asia is to put individuals, particularly young girls, into the weaving business, weaving the rugs and the carpets and those things that we in America spend so much money for, these intricately woven things that are provided by pure indentured slave labor. And again, that might not be a circumstance where these young children are going there not having knowledge of what they're going into, but perhaps even placed there by their parents. So it's not always a deception. It might have been in some cases, who's to say. But these organizations are helpful in getting contact with the individuals, whether they're there by their own volition or they've been placed into servitude, and trying to remove them from that situation. Also educating individuals on how to avoid these types of slavery and human trafficking episodes.
Yeah, right. So they're not deceived, kind of, or
yeah,
on what they're signing up for.
And I was looking here at my notes too. I think your next question is, how can the average individual help?
Right. What can we do?
in trying to avoid being victimized by this, as well as helping others that have already been victimized. What I found is that at the community level, you can organize your own events and get sponsorships if that's something that you feel comfortable in doing, to raise awareness of this. And if you do something like an actual event where you're raising funds, there are a number of organizations that you can donate the proceeds to from those events. Right. The other thing is, like you said, with individual companies and businesses being made aware of this, perhaps in your community you can go out with leaflets and provide information as to what is going on with the trafficking industry and the human slavery, and make your community more aware. And another type of event is avoiding products and companies that are involved in this. And unfortunately, there's a lot of companies, even U.S. based, that do utilize a lot of what we would call slave labor, or certainly underpaid labor. And I found a site at the Department of Labor's list of goods produced by child labor or forced labor exists. The Department of Labor's list of goods produced by child labor or forced labor. They have a number of organizations, both U.S. based and internationally based, that they provide as a list to those individuals that want to be not involved in funding these groups that get their labor and provide our goods and service with forced labor. And so those are some things that you can do within your own neighborhood. And I think also at the family level is maybe take a little time and talk to your kids as they're of age that's appropriate, and make them aware that it's not just the stranger danger we talked about when we were kids. When I was a kid, certainly not you so much, but I think you were in part of that era where there was the human trafficking that started. But my group was stranger danger. Avoid somebody at the park with the dog, and that's not it anymore. It's and it might even be in certain countries, less in the United States. So it might be your relative. Yep. It might be somebody that that is soliciting you and from anything from acts of prostitution to indentured servitude. So
Yeah, that's scary. Yeah, I know it's still really big in Roseville, and it's like right on the doorstep. It's just so scary.
Yes. And again, what I saw a lot of it, not a lot, but we just touched the surface of it. You would arrest somebody for a narcotics violation, and they would not want to go to jail for that particular violation. And so they want to negotiate with you. Well, oftentimes the negotiations weren't about who I bought the drugs from, where I'm getting the drugs, how often I take the drugs, or those types of things that it used to be in the small world of narcotics. It led to, I know where there are these girls that are being taken by my drug dealers to raise money for them to buy their drugs in Reno or Las Vegas or various areas out of the area, certainly beyond the state borders, for prostitution purposes. And that was my first exposure to this type of circumstance. Obviously, I heard of the human trafficking, but wait a minute. And the difficult thing with that is if you approach a district attorney with that as a sentence consideration, it's kind of not on the map yet. And so, yeah, you could negotiate and try to get the information, but knowing that you were not going to help them resolve their case or get consideration in sentencing, because it kind of, again, was off the map. You're going to go to Reno and go find these girls, whatever. And we knew it existed, though. And there are some organizations, and the district attorney in Sacramento, for example, has a lost or stolen or missing abduction unit, and they help with that, certainly. But it's like bailing out the ocean with a bucket of water. So we've really got to probably figure out worldwide that we need to do something worldwide as an organization of peoples. Yeah.
Pull ahead from rear.
Yep, exactly.
Like, come on, basic human decency, man. So, all righty, Skip. Well, thank you for sharing another very cheery topic with me. I really appreciate that.
I'm here to put a smile on everyone's face with dead bodies and slavery.
There you go. But it's just so important. Everybody needs to be heads up, know what kind of resources we have and we can help with. So
I am just more than thrilled to know someone as noble and as good-hearted as you that's continuing to provide this information to people, and you do it out of the graciousness of your heart. And it just does me good to know that there's young people out there that are still fighting the fight.
Well, thank you. Make me blush now.
Okay, guys, so great resources there on how you can make a difference today in the human trafficking crisis. We need to all be talking about this and raising awareness so that it does not happen in the United States and, across the globe, because freedom. I mean, that's freedom, Nobody should be treated that way. Everybody is born the same, with the same rights under the eyes of God and the laws of nature. So, definitely something that I feel very, very fervently about, and some great resources there. If you didn't have your pen and paper with you, don't worry. You can head on over to my website, go to the Changing Earth Survival Guide, and I have every single episode there with extensive notes on each one. So there is a ton of information over there. Just click on the human trafficking link for this episode, and you'll be able to find all the resources there with links on how you can help and how you can make a difference and how you can report an incident if you are privy to it. So thank you so much, Skip, for coming on and raising awareness about human trafficking. Definitely something that everybody should be doing and sharing those resources so we're all a little bit more situationally aware of what's going on around us, what might be happening to the people around us that we just don't even think about. I also want to take a moment to thank my supporters. You guys are what makes the Changing Earth go round and keep going round. And, thank God for Chin and all you supporters. That's why the show is still going. And I can't thank you enough, because I really love sharing my stories with you and educating you on all these great topics. So thank you so much for all that you do. If you would like to become a supporter, please head on over to www.authorSarafhathaway.com/support. That's www.author Sara, F like Frank, Hathaway, HATHAWAY.com/support. Thanks for listening out there. Wouldn't be worth doing the show if you weren't out there listening. I really love hearing all your feedback. So get out there, give me some feedback. Go purchase The Endless Night on the pre-order so I can jam on my Amazon numbers, and leave a review if you got a chance. And until next week, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sara for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, Battle for the South, and Dark Days in Denver at www.authorsarafhathaway.com. If you love Sara's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.